Ralph Ellison's hatred of Harlem turned into loathing by midsummer 1947. He wrote about how he despised the crime, the casual violence, the crumbling buildings full of litter and vermin-infested rooms. He complained about how loud music reverberated at almost all hours of the day, along with continuous loud voices. He felt Harlem was a ruin. Not surprisingly then, after an inconvenient visit to their tiny apartment by Fanny's mother and her husband from Chicago, Ralph acted on a sudden invitation for he and Fanny to spend 2 weeks in August in the mountains of Vermont. Their small escape from Harlem did indeed help comfort his mind and body. However, upon their return to the city, the novel remained yet unfinished. Back in their small apartment, back in the noise, back in the ill-smelling alleyways, he dreaded the November 30th meeting that was moving towards him like a high-speed train. And with Fanny encouraging him, he returned alone to Vermont following Labor Day to make one final big effort to complete the book. There would be a sacrifice involved, however. Fanny would not be able to visit on weekends as she had when he was in Quogue. Most likely, this would be their longest time apart since their meeting in June 1944. Alone at last, he savored the moment. This was his time to shine. The pressure was on. Though he felt lonely without Fanny, he did the best he could to enjoy the process. On warm days, he would sit outside with the dogs and read. When time came to get back to writing, well, that proved to be difficult. He did his best to form a schedule around writing, especially after some cash and supplies, which included dog food, a carton of cigarettes, cold medicine, writing paper, and Bengay ointment, arrived from Fanny. A morning, he felt, was the best time for writing, but in order to make that happen, he first needed to get the fireplace going. For that, a friend found him an oil stove, but its fumes made him so sick he had to give it up. As the mishaps piled up, he decided to shorten his stay. What was the point of remaining in Vermont if it did not increase his output? But just as he was about to give up and return to the city, an Indian summer set in, unleashing the famed shimmering russet gold and brown colors of New England in the fall sunshine. He was mesmerized by the beauty of the local nature and decided to press on with his writing. When nearing mid-November, after 2 months in Vermont, he returned to New York. Now, exactly how much progress he had made on the book is unclear, but one thing is for sure: the November 30th deadline came and went. Yet unfinished, seasons passed as he worked to bring it to a close. He withdrew more and more from the life he led when he was green and eager to sample the pleasures of New York's nightclubs and dance halls. Instead, he favored more cerebral adventures. Early in 1949, Ralph wrote to Stanley Hyman that his novel was just about done and that he wanted to get it ready for fall publication. Things were going fairly well as he was making the final edits, but he was, according to himself, nevertheless, quote, full of doubts and stubbornness, like a man juggling boulders into a pile which he hopes will be a house. I haven't lost sight of my form, but I must admit that I am somewhat swamped by the proportions of the thing, and by the many possibilities of which I cannot possibly take advantage. Well, despite his best efforts, by the fall of 1949, completion was still far away. Still writing, revising, cutting, pasting, and on, even as Fanny diligently typed in the evenings and on weekends to prepare a pristine version of what he was sure was the final draft for submission to Random House. Now, at about the same time, adding to the pressure, another black writer won an unparalleled honor. In the spring of 1950, Gwendolyn Brooks of Chicago captured that year's Pulitzer Prize for poetry with her Annie Allen collection. Like Ellison, Brooks had schooled herself on the ideas and aesthetic practices of white writers such as T.S. Eliot and Ezra Pound with the colorful reality of Black America. It worked. White America responded by rewarding her with its finest literary honor. The world was indeed changing, and it was obvious to Ralph Ellison that he needed to be a part of this change with the Invisible Man. Now, then came the year 1951, which passed uneventfully for Ralph and Fanny, except for the chronic gnawing in his stomach due to his fear of his book's possible failure. Starting in September of 1951, however, excitement about the novel began to build at Random House, where the decision was made to call the book Invisible Man instead of The Invisible Man. And while the buzz grew, Ellison finished his all-important epilogue, promising to be honest with the reader. The protagonist, Invisible, insists that he has learned to speak positively, optimistically, even when his gut tells him different. And to forgive, Invisible learns, may be divined and also necessary. As he accepts this lesson, Invisible finds himself ready to return to the world. He also now knows the absolute value of love and also of a belief in his own black humanity. His humble grandfather, he now sees, never doubted his own humanity. The thought that does frighten him is this, and I quote, "Who knows but that on the lower frequencies I speak for you? Who knows for a fact that all people aren't invisible to one another, plagued by conflict between head and heart, mind and body, and incapable of seeing the humanity in others? Who knows but that each and every one of us needs a spell of solitary confinement to make us understand ourselves and other human beings?" With Invisible's question, the novel ends. Poet Kenneth Burke cleverly pointed out to Ellison's surprise that the first word of his novel is I, and the last is you. The novel hit stands on April 14th, 1952, and by April 30th, Random House had sold just over 6,000 copies. On May 11th, Invisible Man was number 10 on the New York Times Book Review bestseller list. The following week, it rose to number 9 before dropping steadily over the next few weeks. On June 22nd, it rallied to number 8, but soon fell off the charts for good. The novel was a modest bestseller with only about 8,000 copies sold in the 6-month period, which began with June 1st. The honors were dwindling in number, but he had reason to believe that he had arrived. And due to the quality of his book and the admirable response to it, he was now a respected presence on the New York literary scene. He understood and appreciated the significance of his rise. Although his great achievement would later haunt him, in 1952, Ralph Ellison had arrived.